It's so pretty. Wow. That's a lot of fabric. So, funny story, actually, when I was ordering this fabric, I was on a call with friends. I was going through a crisis, as I always do when I'm buying fabric, because I'm like, it's so much money, but I really, really want it. And so I didn't really realize that when I was buying this sheer fabric, it was actually 118 inches wide instead of the usual like 60 inches. So I only needed about half as much as I actually got, but we're just gonna have fun with it because I got a ton of fabric, okay? So this fabric, which is, I'm actually in love with this color. I was really on the fence about it. But this is 4 yards of a crepe back satin, which I've used before. I really, really love this fabric. And then this, it's so heavy. This is 15 yards of 18-inch wide sheer wool. I don't know how you pronounce that. Let's look it up together, shall we? I'm terrible at pronouncing stuff.
How do you say it correctly?
I don't know. How do you?
Voile.
Voile. I'm gonna go with calling it voile. I think that's right. But it's so pretty. I really, really love this. So the plan for this dress is I'm going to be making like the ultimate Valentine's Day dress. Hence the super, super pink color. I like always miss out on doing Valentine's Day dresses somehow. Like I always think about doing it every year and then I forget that the holiday's coming. So, trying to get an early start this year. I'm really, really excited about it. I'm just going to try to make like the most romantic dress I possibly can. And it should be really fun and really pretty. And I'm really, really excited about it. I have so much fabric to work with. If anybody has tips for sewing with pets, please send them my way because my pets refuse to let me sew in peace. But for this project, I started by cutting out these skirts first because I knew that was going to take obviously the most fabric. And then I figured out a way to work out all of my bodice pieces with the leftovers. My back hurts so much, and I've only just cut out the satin layer. I also need to get one of my scrap fabrics for the lining because I didn't have enough of this for the lining. So I should have gotten 5 yards of this and a lot less of the sheer fabric, but it is what it is. This is just a sheet, by the way, that I have. I'm so tired, but I still have all of this to cut out. But I finished all the lining pieces and now I have to meet my family for dinner. So, till tomorrow. As we got takeout.
Yo.
It's so pretty. And here are all the pattern pieces for you guys with their measurements. So the first one here is the front piece, and I outlined the sheer one so you guys can see it a little better. It's just an elongated version of the regular front piece because we're going to be gathering it up and making it look all cute. And then these here are the rest of the bodice pieces. So we got the center piece, the side piece, and then the back pieces. And it's a lot of information, so I'm just gonna let you guys take a screenshot of that, take it all in. I'm basically just cutting a whole bunch of layers of all of these. These also are going to have interfacing in them to make them a little bit more sturdy. And then here we have the sleeve pieces. I put these on the fold so that you guys can see them a little bit better. But I also included the total length that they should be. And then this one right here is the ruffle pieces. And if my calculations are correct, I used almost 1,680 inches total for my ruffles, which is insane. But for each of these, they were all 120 inches long, and I cut out 14 of them, so 7 for each skirt. And this is definitely the most ruffles I've ever done. I thought the Wednesday dress couldn't top it, but I think this does. And then this one here is the skirt lining piece. This is the satin layer, and it's 3/4 of a circle skirt. And I already like sewed this into one piece because I kind of like had to scrap mine together a little bit. But you can just cut it a regular 3/4 circle skirt. The only thing is down the opening is going to have this kind of curved shape because it's going to have a slit. And then the regular skirt pieces are pretty similar, except they're a full circle skirt, and we're going to be cutting 2 out of our sheer fabric. But again, they're going to have that same little beveled edge at the opening. It is quite literally freezing outside, so I got my sweatpants on today, and school's canceled for the next 2 days, so that means I'm just going to be sewing a ton. So I'm really excited to make some progress on this dress, and I'm really hoping that it warms up by the time I need to model it, because I'm not going out there. I don't do well with cold weather. I'm really cold inside. Basil loves it though. I already went ahead and added interfacing to all of the pieces that needed it. And now I'm just going to start by basting my sheer fabric to my satin on all of my front pieces, except for the very top one. That one we're gonna have to do a little bit differently. And then I'm just going to sew all my pieces together, doing the lining separately from everything else. The only piece I'm not going to be sewing yet is the top one again. The assembly for this bodice is pretty straightforward. It's kind of how all of my bodices go. So on the little centerpiece, we're going to attach either of our side pieces so they kind of make this curving shape. And then for the back pieces, I just paired them up and sewed them together down the little slanted edge. And for all of these pieces that we sewed together out of our satin fabric, we're going to be doing the exact same thing for all of the lining pieces. Now that all of our main bodice pieces have been sewn, we're going to start working on the top piece. And I just cut it down a little bit because I realized that the bottom part should also have this kind of triangle shape. And I did that to all of the front pieces. And now the way I think I'm going to go about this is I'm going to take the sheer one that we did, and I'm going to put my 2 parallel basting stitches all across the top edge of it and ruffle it to fit into this one. And then I basted those together, and then I basted all of the top pieces together and flipped that seam over so that we would have a finished edge along the top. And then I basted the lining and the satin layers together along the bottom and ruffled that up a little bit underneath the bust. And then I ruffled the entire bottom edge of the sheer piece and gathered it so that it would fit into the bottom of the other pieces. Pinned those together, basted across it, and ironed this all out so that it lays really flat. And now we are here. And now I'm going to finish assembling the rest of the bodice pieces. So now we're going to be sewing those little front pieces that we already put together to the actual center top piece. So I'm making sure that the triangular points like match up down the centers. And then I'm just following the rest of the curve and pinning it all together. And I'm sandwiching the ruffled layer between the lining and the satin layer so that when we turn it right side out, we're already going to have a finished seam. Then again, working on the back pieces, I am attaching one of our lining pieces to one of these satin layers and sewing them together across the top. Again, so that we can have that finished edge. And then we're going to open up those back pieces and we're going to kind of like lay them over top of the front pieces and like fold it over so that it's sandwiching the front pieces. So that when we sew right across this, we're going to have a finished edge all the way across the top of the bodice. It's also important to note that throughout this whole process, I was serging my fabric so that I wouldn't have too much unraveling. And then we're going to be adding in some boning to give it some more structure. So this roll I just got off of Amazon. I will link it in the description. And I'm cutting it into pieces to fit where I want them to. And I'm rounding both the top edge and the bottom edges so that they won't poke through my fabric at all and have any harsh edges. And then I am just top stitching my little boning channels onto my bodice. And I'm putting 2 down the front, 1 down either side, and then later you'll see I'm going to put 2 in the back as well. And then we can just insert our boning directly into these channels. Quite honestly, the last thing that I want to do in this weather is take off all of my layers so that I can like try on this dress, but I think it needs to be done. Okay, but it is looking really stinking cute. And so now we have to actually add on the closure and how we're going to be getting this dress on and off. So I decided to go with a lace-up back. So I took this old hair ribbon that I had because it was the only pink ribbon I had, and I folded it over and sewed it into these little loops. And then I spaced those out onto the back edge where I wanted them on the satin layer. And then you're going to see I'm going to fold over my back piece again and like overlap them so that we can sew straight down this piece, and when we turn it back right side out, it's already going to be a finished seam with all of those little loops. I just finished up the bodice, and so I added those little loops on the back, and as you can see I like laced it up so that I could try it on. And then I also added an extra boning channel right here so that it stays nice and stiff when you lace it up. And now the bodice is totally done, except for the fact that I still have to add the sleeves on it. So I think I'm going to do that tonight, and then I'm going to call it because a girl's getting tired. It was a really productive day today though. I'm really happy. And moving on to those sleeves, I'm folding these in half like the long way, like the hot dog way, you know, like when you're in preschool and it's like hamburger or hot dog. Sewing it the hot dog way all the way across and turning that right side out so that we basically have this really long tube. And then I'm going to bring those unfinished edges together and I'm going to sew them around so that we are creating like a completed tube now, because I wanted the sleeves to be doubled up on the fabric so that it would be a little bit more opaque, and then we would already have like all of these finished edges and I don't really have to worry about it. So as you can see here, once you turn it right side out, it's a complete tube, and there's going to be like a little hole in the back that you can hand stitch up if you want. But then I'm just taking some really thin elastic that fits around my arms, and I'm going to be pulling that as tight as I possibly can and stitching it down while it still has that tension, so that when you release it, it gathers up the fabric and makes it really, really stretchy. And I did this about 1 centimeter away from the top edge so that it would still give me like a little baby ruffle. And then I'm just top stitching that directly onto the bodice, right about where the side seam is. I really love how this is looking right now. I'm just going to add some stitches to kind of like tack the sleeve so that it's a little bit tighter. And then I'm going to do the other sleeve off camera. And I've also been meaning to add more boning here because I took like the channel from here and put it in the back for the lace up. And I couldn't find my boning for the life of me, even though I had just had it. I searched for it like 7 times. Turns out Baegel was chewing on it in the living room, so that's really great. So it's the next day and I finished putting on both the sleeves, and I also took out the corset back and I decided to make it a little bit smaller so I could cinch it a little bit tighter because it was a little bit too big. And I also added an extra loop, so now there's 5 loops total. And it's really time to work on the skirts now. But we're having a really severe winter storm, which is why school's canceled again today. And so I ordered a ruffler foot to do all of the huge ruffles I want to do, and it hasn't been delivered for 2 days now because of the weather. So I might just have to do it by hand, which I really don't want to do, but we'll see. Okay, so now that the bodice is totally done, I have to start working on the skirts, which I have a feeling is going to take me a while because there's going to be a lot of ruffling to do. And I already went ahead and sewed all of my lining pieces into one big piece and left the slit down the center where those kind of beveled edges are. So the first thing that I did to the skirts is around the waistband I put those seams together where the opening was, and just sewed it a little bit down so that where the slit is, it wouldn't start all the way at the top of the dress. It would kind of start a few inches down my leg. And then I pinned it all around the waist of the bodice, and there was about 1 inch or 2 of extra fabric in the back, which is what we want. Oh, and I also lined up the slit to be right where the centerpiece and the side piece meet on the front. And then after that was sewn, I lined it up in the back where that little extra fabric was, and I cut about 9 inches down a slit in the back so that we can get the dress on and off. And then I'm doing pretty much the same thing to the sheer fabric, but the waistband on the sheer fabric is a lot larger because we're going to be ruffling this one. So instead of putting it on the skirt first, I sewed that slit, and then I put the 2 sheer skirt layers together and then added 2 parallel basted stitches across the top edge of them at the same time and gathered that up into pretty even ruffles that would fit into the waistband of the dress. And then I just pinned those together, again leaving about 1 inch of extra fabric in the back, and then I pinned all those layers together and sewed them around. And then again, where that extra fabric was in the back, I cut another slit so that we can get it on and off. Not gonna lie, I'm kind of speechless. Hi, I know you think it's so exciting. It's so exciting, huh? So it has the slit. You don't like me being productive, do you? So it does have the slit in the front. It has a slit in the front. I accidentally put it on the wrong side because I sewed the pieces the wrong way and then had to seam rip it and then redo it. But it's fine. It's just on the other side now. And so these are still all the raw edges. I'm probably going to have to cut down the front a little bit because it's a little bit long. And then I also pinned this bow that I made out of some scraps on the back, and I think I like it. I don't know if it's a little bit tacky, but it's a Valentine's Day dress. Like, it has to be kind of extra, and I really love the lace-up detail. But I'm still waiting on that ruffler foot, so I'm hoping that's going to come in tomorrow because the weather is supposed to be a little bit better tomorrow. But I'm also packing and leaving for a trip tomorrow, so I don't know that I'm actually going to get around to this for like another week or so. But I mean, really the last thing to do is add all the ruffles on the front, and then I think I want to stitch on this bow and finish up that little like back seam a little bit. But it's really cute! Okay, I just got back from my trip last night and I am really, really tired. But the ruffler foot that I have been waiting on just came in, or actually rather it came in right as I was leaving. So I'm gonna do some experimenting with it to see how I want these to look. Because I've never used one of these before, but I'm really, really excited and have very high hopes. So if this doesn't go well, I will be disappointed. I mean, it did make ruffles. So this one right here is the one I think I'm going to go with. And this is with my stitch on a regular size, but with my tension up to 7. And then I had a ton of ruffling to do. So I took my like individual ruffles and sewed them into these really long strips. And I did 7 at a time so that we would have one for the outer layer of the skirt and one for like the inner layer of the skirt, so that I had an equal way to distribute them. And when I sewed these together into these really long strips, I was also using French seams so that I wouldn't have to worry about it unraveling. And there was so much fabric to go through. This is just half of all the ones I cut out. So I'm gonna start ruffling these together. I do have to say the ruffler foot made this so much easier. I definitely recommend getting one of these if you don't have one. I don't know why I put it off for so long. I will of course link it in the description box below. But it just made this whole process so much easier. Instead of having to ruffle this all by hand, I was just able to sew it all in one go. Oh, and also before I sewed these ruffles on, I also decided to cut the front of the skirts a little bit shorter so that when it had the ruffles on, it would just hit the floor. And this would also kind of give me a little mini train in the back. Oh my goodness. And then to actually attach the ruffles to the skirt, I did this, of course, one layer at a time. And I just pinned them all around the perimeter of the skirt, and because it has those beveled edges, it goes like all the way up into the slit, so you want to like make it go up and then curve back down around the other side, so we have like this cascade of ruffles all the way down. And like I said, I did the ruffles on my skirt layers individually to give it even more floof. I love that whenever I like start these projects, I'm always like, look at me, I'm starting so early. I'm gonna be like so early for Valentine's Day, and then everything, I always end up being late somehow. So I'm really rushing now. I need to finish this dress today because I should also model it today. I'm just really behind. So let's finish her up. So to finish it up, I just had to finish like this little slit in the back that we had made. And to do that, I used some single fold bias tape to just give us a finished seam. And after I did that, there was still like a big hole in the back, obviously. So what I did is I ended up taking some hook and eye tape that I had. You can just use regular hook and eyes if that's easier for you. But I just added some of that down the back so that I had a way to actually clasp it closed. And then down the back, I also hand stitched on that little bow I had made. And I just sewed it to one side of my closure, obviously, so that we would still be able to get the dress on and off. And then the only thing left to do was to hem all of these ruffles and the satin layer of the skirt. And this took me quite literally forever. I used a rolled hem foot and then just went at it for a few hours. But finally, here is the finished dress. I feel like I always say this, but I really, really love how this dress turned out. This might be my possibly new favorite one that I've made. I just think it's so dreamy, so romantic, which is exactly what I set out to make. And I think it's the perfect thing to celebrate Valentine's Day in. I'm obsessed with the way that this whole dress like flows and drapes. And I really, really love this wall. I'm very happy with it. Getting so much extra on accident ended up being the move. I used most of it actually for this dress because I kind of just wanted to see like how big and poofy I could actually make it, and I think that was definitely achieved. But thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I hope you guys have a wonderful Valentine's Day. If you guys are interested in a pattern for this dress, please let me know in the comments. I might try to make one. And other than that, happy Valentine's Day. I love you guys. Bye!